Ready? So we have to start the class like this. Okay, good.
No, like this.
What? When we do the walk?
Yeah.
Okay. Avram!
He's also having a very
You missed my Stone Cold Steve Austin impression to start the class. Come, sit. Okay. We are starting Likutey Moharan, Torah, Kaf, Tet, 29. It is a very fascinating Torah. It's very beneficial for us, especially considering what we've been speaking about the last few lessons. I think it's really going to help us come close to HaShem and get our prayers answered, Bezrat Hashem, change our lives, hopefully. So, he starts with a story from the Gemara in Bechorot. So listen to the story. Everybody follow. You ready?
What'd you say? You started the story of what?
From the Gemara, from Bechorot. It starts like this. Hi Gavra da'azir ba'ei ita. There was a man who went seeking a wife. Anybody can relate to this?
Not me, I'm married.
Ooh, anybody here seeking a wife?
Now or before?
Hey!
You're seeking away, right?
Talking about you.
Which one?
Michael ben Ima Shalom and Mazal bat Yafa. Amen. Okay. So a certain man was seeking a wife. But they didn't give her to him. What did he see that made him go to find a better one? Shakam sikta datsa latata la ayal. He took a peg and he pressed it below. Delayed datsa la ela aal. He raised it up and he pressed it higher up. Is everybody following me? Or you guys are just like all on your own?
Can you start over?
Where have you guys been for the past 2 seconds?
I lost you already.
Did you lose me already? We just started. Okay. It's embarrassing for you guys on the table.
Or you want to start it with?
No, very quickly.
Our faces are hidden.
A man is looking for a wife. Easy enough? You guys know something like this? Okay. A man's looking for a wife. They didn't give her to him.
Right.
What did... Oh, okay, we don't know. What did he see that made him decide he wanted to go find a better one than the one he was originally looking for?
He said no.
So what did he do? He took a peg and he pressed it in below. A peg is like a nail, so like similar to a nail.
Okay.
He raised it up and he pressed it higher up. Okay? And it went in. Amar, he said, Hi nami mitramia le bat mazale. That one too has found his bat mazle, his destined mate. Okay, this is the story in the Gemara. If it doesn't make sense to you, that's a good sign that you're paying attention to me. If you think you got it, you're not listening. Okay? That's like every story we do in the Gemara and the Quran. Okay, good. So now listen to what Rav Nachman says. Ki lo kol dibor nikra dibor. Not all speech is called speech. Okay, I'm going to need everybody not to speak while I'm speaking about speech. And then at the end, when you have questions and comments, you're good to go. Ki lo kol dibor nikra dibor. Not all speech is called speech. Ki dibor she'eno nishma v'nikabel eno nikra dibor. Because speech that is not heard and it's not answered, it's not called speech. Remember, we spoke about this many times. Rav Nachman has a chidush nifla. You know what makes speech speech?
If it's heard.
If it's heard. Where does he get this from? So there's a pasuk in Tehillim. We say this every Shabbat. Ein omer ve'ein devarim bali nishma kolam. Which means there is no speech and no words without their voice being heard. Now what is this pasuk speaking about? So on a very simple level, it's talking about how the whole creation praises Hashem. But because it's praising Hashem in a communication that's different than our voice, there's no speech being heard from it. Right? All day and all night, all of creation is praising Hashem, but we don't understand it because we don't hear the speech. But they're doing it. That's the simple understanding. Rav Nachman reads it differently. He reads it, Ein Omer, there is no speech. Why is it not speech? The Ein Devarim B'li Nishma, because the words are not heard. You hear? It's beautiful.
They're not answered, they're just not heard.
Heard, not answer, all of it.
Same idea.
Right? So he's saying that this is a formula for what the Torah calls speech. So now listen to what I want to say. This is a very important way to start the class. You have to get this in order to really appreciate the beauty of this Torah. Okay? What's the important distinction that Rav Nachman is trying to make? Okay, so speech that's heard is called speech. Speech that's not heard is not called speech. So what's the nafkamina in our life? Why does it make a difference? This is all rhetorical. My speech is not meant to be heard and reciprocated. Just to be heard, okay? Speech is only called speech when it causes a change in your environment or it forces a response and a change in your circumstances of your life. Understand? It's a mechanism of creation. It's how you create in your life. It's how you change reality through speech. So if it's not heard, meaning it doesn't have an effect on the listener to the extent that that listener is now responding, or there's an internal change without the listener, that the listener is now responding to that change. Or let's say that you're praying to Hashem, and Hashem doesn't change your life according to your prayer. So you see that the whole concept of speech that's heard means that your words are changing reality. When your words change reality, according to the Torah, this is called dibur, this is called speech. And if they don't change your reality, it's not called speech. Everybody with me so far?
That could really bring the person down.
So if the speech doesn't compel a response from the listener, or it doesn't cause a tangible change in your life, the Torah doesn't call this speech. Now perhaps this is what David HaMelech meant when he says in Ashrei, Hashem, everybody who calls to Hashem, Hashem responds. To all who call to Him in truth. So maybe David HaMelech is giving a subtle hint about what type of speech Hashem responds to. The one that's called out in truth, He always responds to that.
Because that's speech.
Yeah, because when your speech has truth in it, there's a little hint for the lesson. When your speech is infused with truth, then that's called speech. But if it's not with truth, it's not called speech. And what's the proof? Hashem doesn't hear it. That's why Ashrei says, to all who call to Hashem, Hashem responds, all who call to Him in truth. Why? Because that's the only thing that's called speech. Hashem can't respond to speech when it's not really speech, right? If you're saying to Hashem, what is He going to do with that? Or let's say you're trying to raise your kid, and your kid's not listening to you, right? So how is he going to listen to you if you're just saying... He can only respond if you're speaking to him. In a language that's infused with the truth. If there's no truth, it's a hint to the lesson we're going to talk about. It's not called speech because speech has to be heard. Meaning what? When you attain the level called speech, that the words are heard, that's called Lashon HaKodesh. The whole concept of Lashon HaKodesh is that the words are heard and they make a change in the creation. Now I was thinking about this. How far and how deep does this go? We know that Hashem created the world using Lashon HaKodesh, right? Very famous Torah. Chazal teach that Hashem created the world using the Hebrew language, Lashon HaKodesh. So the Chiddush seems to be He chose that language and no other language. So I want to say a deeper Chiddush. The Chiddush that He made it with Lashon HaKodesh is that that's how you make anything with Lashon HaKodesh. He couldn't make it any other way because the whole mechanism of creation is Lashon HaKodesh. It's not that He chose Lashon HaKodesh over any other language. is that that's the language that creates.
I mean, every other language is not really.
It's not really. Oh, there you go. You got it. You understand? That means that any other language is not really speech because that speech isn't heard.
So why does the Rav Nachman Dafka say to pray in your language?
Because that's called speech. Because speech is Lashon HaKodesh doesn't have to be Hebrew.
It has to be anything in truth.
It has to be speech that's based on truth.
That you understand.
You understand it. It's coming from your own heart. Therefore, it's true for you, and that's why it's heard. Okay, so wait. So listen to this. In fact, this year I'm reading the Perush of the Ramban on the Chumash. Like last year I did Rashi. I went through the whole thing. Thank God. I finished the whole Rashi. This year I'm doing the Ramban.
That's amazing. He's great.
Baruch Hashem. You could do it too.
I do it.
Okay, good.
That's why I know. It's amazing.
So I want to tell you something amazing. The Ramban is a genius. A genius. Just read him on Bereshit and your mind is going to be exploding. In a lot of ways, it's very interesting because Rashi is the Peshat, meaning he explains the simple understanding. The Ramban is much more practical. And yes, very much. When you read his Peshat, it's like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. The Ramban. Okay, Avram, listen to this because you're going to appreciate this. Okay? The Ramban says, on the first time that HaShem says, and He created. Guys, the first time that HaShem says, and it was. So what does the Ramban say there? So he says something amazing. He says whenever the Torah wants to describe something going from potential to reality, it uses the term, he said. So when Hashem says, why does it say that Hashem says? Because it's trying to describe in a way that you can understand Hashem is taking potential creation and He's making it the real creation. So when Hashem says, let there be light, and there was light, it means that Hashem took light and potential and He made it real. When Hashem said, let there be sun and a moon, He took the sun and the moon and potential and He made it real. That's what it means that He said. He took it from potential and He turned it into reality. Is that not exactly what we were discussing?
Yeah.
That's speech.
Yeah.
That is exactly what we're saying, that Rav Nachman is teaching what speech is. Speech is something that's heard. It makes a change in the creation. So that's what the Ramban is saying. When Hashem says, and it is, because that's what speech is. What do we always talk about? The first time any concept is described in the Torah, that's its essence. So Hashem says, and then that infuses and changes the creation. That means that that's all speech. That's what speech is. And any speech that doesn't say and it is, that's not called speech.
Wow.
And you're going to see how deep this goes. Because why? We know that Hashem used 10 sayings of creation.
10 what?
There's 10 sayings of creation. So the way that we read this is like, wow, Hashem's amazing. He could have saw the world into existence. He could have heard the world into existence. He spoke the world into existence with 10 sayings. No, that's not the Chiddush. The Chiddush is, the creation is all sayings. You can only create through sayings. So there were 10 creative sayings. Everybody with me?
It's very just one more time.
Okay.
I'm tripping, boy.
Hashem says and it is. Hashem says and it is. The rabbis say He did this 10 times. So the Chiddush seems to be that Hashem spoke the world of creation. That's amazing. That He speaks and then that creates a reality. But the Torah is actually teaching that is speech. When the speech creates the reality.
Right.
That is what the speech is. That's the Chiddush.
Like when you speak to Alexa or...
Alexa?
I don't know who you're speaking to. I'm pretty sure your wife's name is not Alexa. And I know for sure any of the Jewish people at the table, their wife's name is also not Alexa.
Google Alexa.
Okay, whatever you call her, but it's not kosher, okay? Yeah, okay, when you speak to Alexa, what happens?
You get things done.
Okay. Now we know what you're doing when you're not at the class. You're speaking to Alexa. Very good. But yeah, she responds. Very good. So that whole concept, that you speak to Alexa and it is, that's real speech.
And it is.
And it is. That's exactly what it is. But what happens when you speak to people, your friends, your family, and they don't listen to you? It's because you're not speaking to them. You're doing something else. There are words coming out of your mouth. You're talking, but you're not speaking. You hear me, but you ain't listening. You hear? It's not speech. It's not speech. Because if you were speaking, they would listen. And if nobody listens to you, it's because you don't know how to talk.
Oh my God.
They just do like
You don't know how to talk. You're not talking the truth.
no, yeah, and that's speech.
Some people have ADHD, they can't pay attention.
No, that's not what it is.
You're saying something which is perfectly clear, but the other person's not tuned in.
So that means that there is something missing in your talk, and therefore it's not called speech. We're gonna see in a second. We're gonna see.
You talk, but you don't walk the walk, you heard?
And I'm hearing you, so you're speaking right now, but there's no talking during the middle of the class until the end. Okay, not for you, just in general. I just making this. Okay. Now listen to where this goes. The ikar, the essence, ma shenika bela dibur. So now the question we should all have is, because this is obviously very important, because if the only time my words are heard are when they're called speech, what's the obvious question? What turns my words into speech? What makes my words considered speech? Because what's the nafkamina? The difference between all of your prayers getting answered or none of your prayers getting answered.
There must be a middleman.
If you're doing Ibodah, dude, you're talking to Hashem every day, but you're not speaking, Hashem can't answer you.
Because like, did you watch
You're
your
talking.
speech beforehand?
You're talking, but you ain't speaking. So now we have to find out what causes talk to become speech. Right? That's the obvious question.
Right, truth. When you watch it, you say it.
I hinted to you the answer, but let's see what it says. Hu mechamat tov sheyesh bo. What makes it speech is the good that's in your words.
Speak English.
Just wait, because it's so beautiful what he's saying. What makes your words speech, what turns your words from vain air which is coming out of your larynx through your mouth that is not responded to a creative energy which completely changes reality, is whether what you're saying is good or not. You know how we always say, like when you're learning with somebody, he says good? He's saying good?
You're saying good.
Are you saying good? That's a real thing. When you say good, that's called speech.
Isn't there a whole thing about like you can't say bad because it could happen?
So then, so we have to learn what good is. That's what we're going to talk about in a second.
Okay. So good is not
Good doesn't mean we're hanging out at an electronic music festival and we're all kicking back with our brewskis and we're having a good time together and everything is kumbaya. That doesn't mean tov. It did mean good for me a few years ago, but it's not my good anymore. So what's the tov now? What is good? And why is it so important? Why does that make the speech heard? So listen to what it says. Ki tov hakol chafetzim. Because good is what everyone desires. What causes your speech to be heard is the good that's in it, because the good that's in your speech is what is drawing that speech into the listener's heart to be answered. It's the good which is making the impact in your speech. It causes the ratzon of the listener to be attracted to it. The ratzon is only attracted to good.
You can only have that attractive good by speaking with it.
So wait. That's also true. We're going to see in a second what that means. So wait. It's all going to come together. I'm just building this up very slowly, okay? Everybody listen. What causes your words to be heard, and therefore what makes it... You're making me nervous, David. You have to sit down. What causes the words to be heard, and what makes it speech, is that there's good in your speech. Because the good in your speech is what causes the words to be heard. That's it. Now, but when the speech that... Therefore, when the words contain good, Azaya dibur nishma v'nikabel. Then 100%, those words are listened to and heard. Aval kashe'en tov ba'dibur eino nikabel. But when the words do not have good in it, they are not heard and they are not accepted. Now, what is this speech referring to? What type of speech are we talking about here? That when there's no good in it, the words are not heard. So this speech refers to the prayers we have with Hashem, meaning those prayers are only makabel, they're only received and accepted when there's good in it. It has to do with the conversations you have with your friends, meaning they only listen to your reasoning and they only accept your reasoning as truth when there's good in what you're saying. And a very, very subtle point, which is maybe the most important point, is your own internal dialogue. That when you're speaking to yourself, right? You're talking to yourself so that you can make a change within yourself. David, please, you have to stop doing that. You're really hurting the people around you. You have to stop lying. You have to stop cheating. You have to stop overeating. You have to stop whatever. Why is it that I'm not listening to my own advice when I know it's true? Because my words lack tov. They're not good. Because if there was good in those words, I would listen to those words I'm saying to myself. But because they're not, I can't receive those words. The ain osina toma dibur. And how do we create good in the words? Everybody with me so far? How do we create this good in our words? That it becomes speech, so that it's heard. Hu ayadei shalochina dibur. When a person takes that speech and he draws it, mei hada'at, from da'at, from a quality called da'at, which the best possible English translation you could have is experiential God consciousness. There's no good way to say da'at. Spiritual awareness, divine consciousness. So the essence of da'at is that this knowledge brings you closer to Hashem. If the knowledge brings you closer to God, it's called da'at. If it brings you further away, it's called sheker. It's not called da'at. Okay? Da'at brings you closer to Hashem. That's what da'at is. And da'at is something that you feel, that you experience, that brings you to actually experience the thing that you are knowing. Because Hashem is the knowledge. The Rambam says something very interesting. He says Hashem is different than us because we have knowledge, but Hashem is His knowledge. Everything that Hashem knows, He actually is. Therefore, if you know what Hashem knows, you are God.
That is so bugged.
Everybody understand what I said? He doesn't have knowledge. He is knowledge. So therefore, when you know what He knows, you are Him.
If you know what He is, then you are Him.
Yeah.
But that's impossible.
It's
No, it's not
improbable.
not impossible. It's the only one possible. There's the only one that's not besides it.
That's all there is.
What does that mean?
Abraham's head's exploding. Okay. Azah yesh bo tov. So now listen what I said, okay? Listen to what I'm about to tell you. This is very, very, very big stuff. What?
It's like if you're riddle.
Okay, good. It's it's going to become clear to you. Listen to what I'm about to tell you. We need to find out what tov is. He seems to be saying tov is anything which is sourced in da'at. If it's not sourced in da'at, it's not called good. It has to come from da'at. Let's go to the first time that we see the word tov in the Torah. Hashem created the light and He said it was good. Okay?
That's the essence of tov.
Wait. Okay.
Making light.
And Chazal teach that there is no light besides Torah. Meaning on the first day, the light that Hashem created was the Torah. And what did Rav Nachman just teach us? There is no good besides Da'at. And what is Da'at? Torah. So here is the proof. Do you hear the proof? You hear the beautiful connection that we're making here? Hashem created light on the first day. So what did Hashem create on the first day? All of the good that would ever exist.
And turning your Torah into tefillah, speaking speech.
1 second. He created all the good that would ever exist. That's the light. And the Chazal teach there is no light except for the Torah, meaning Da'at. And Rashi says that says this explicitly. That Da'at is Torah. So you see here the light he created that was good is Da'at. So there's a proof. Now what did he do with that Da'at? He hid it away. Why did he hide it? Because he saw that in the future it would be misused and damaged and extinguished. Because it would be used by the wrong people. So he hid it away for the future, for the people who are able to use it for good. Now I want to show you something amazing. I didn't see this anywhere, but HaShem popped it into my head for you guys, okay? Let's go exactly where we are in the beginning of Bereshit. I want to take you now to the exact same place, but in the next book of the Torah. Shemot. It says that Moshe was born. Right in the beginning of the Egyptian exile of the Jewish people, when it was darkness and there was tohu and there was chaos, it says Moshe was born. At the same exact place that it said in the beginning of creation that there was darkness and there was tohu and then light was created, ki tov, it was good. What did it say right after Moshe is created? Ki tov. It's open in the pasuk. Ki tov. What does the Midrash say? That Moshe's family's house was filled with light. And what happened to Moshe as soon as he was born? He was hidden away. Why? Because he might be killed or destroyed. Or misused. Same exact reason. So you see that Moshe and Torah and Da'at are very connected. And what does the Arizal say? Moshe is Da'at. Moshe is Da'at. So what did Hashem create on the first day of creation that he hid away in the future for the tzaddikim? Mashiach. Moshe.
And he hid him away in the palace, the last place anyone would look.
And the irony,
like a tail.
The irony is that light is being raised up and revealed in the world ultimately by evil, by Paro.
That is the trippiest thing ever. Why do you take a baby from a freaking well and raise him? Doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense.
Evil reveals the light.
Yes, it says, Shlomo Melech says there's an advantage of darkness over light. What's the advantage? This. It's a greater revelation. Like we said, what's kavod? What's Hashem's kavod? When Hashem's light is revealed in the darkest places. That's Moshe. Why is Mashiach coming from parents who are Why is he raised in Paro's home?
Because they're
Because they're That's Paro. They have to be. Why does I actually have a whole story in my head.
Let's join.
Let's do it together. Let's have this little story time, okay? What does it mean that Moshe is raised in Paro's home? What do we learn about Mashiach? We came to the conclusion he must have dirty garments. Meaning what? He himself is not connected to Hashem. Right? He's not connected to Hashem. Why? Because he's got dirty garments from his parents. So I think maybe you could say Moshe himself doesn't know he's Moshe his whole life. Because he's raised by Paro. And that's why Hashem, when he comes to him and says, you're the guy... Oh. What a mistake. When he says, you're the guy, he says, I'm definitely not the guy. Why? Because he had Paro's clothes. He says, I can't speak. Oh, I can't speak. I can talk, but I can't speak.
So he said he had a trouble with...
Yeah, he said he had trouble speaking. Yes.
Because of his speech impediment.
He just got it. Okay.
Because he couldn't speak good.
Yes, he couldn't speak well in a way that would hurt. That's why he said, I can't be the leader, because I can't speak. You want to know how deep this goes? What's the word for a leader in Hebrew? Dabar. The same exact word as speech. Because what makes a leader is the fact that he speaks and it's heard.
Davar or davar? Davar.
Dabar.
Like word?
Means it means leader. And it's the same exact word as davar, which means word or speech.
Get out here.
Yeah. It's amazing, no? The Hebrew language. Okay. Okay. Meaning, what's going on with Paro? What is going on with this whole situation? Listen. They told Paro that there's going to be a redeemer. They told Paro there's going to be a redeemer. So he said he's going to be a male boy. He's going to be born. And his demise is going to be in the water. So what did he do? He started killing all of the boys. Who is the redeemer of the Jewish people? God consciousness. That is the redeemer of the Jewish people. And Paro was doing his best to limit the Jewish people's ability to experience truth. So what did he do? He had them busy working all the time. He increased their workload because if they're always working, then they cannot access the truth because they're too busy toiling. Sounds familiar to our generation?
Yes.
How many people say they can't come to the class because they're working too much? You know who that is that's making you work?
Your mother.
Paro. It's Paro. It's Paro.
What does that mean? What does he mean in this metaphor?
He's the Yetzer Hara. He doesn't want you to have redemption. So what does he do? He keeps you from experiencing Da'at.
Gives
So he
you
gives
tired,
you the
gives you
Because the
working.
only, all of that.
He gives you all
Gives
the
you all that.
pleasure.
Why? Because a person can only experience Da'at when his mind is settled. And his mind can't be settled if he's constantly running after money.
Makes you say you have to, and you never have a moment to question it.
That's exactly what the Ramchal says. That's the Yetzer Hara's trick. He gets you to think you have no time or ability to stop what you're doing.
So when it comes to the end, we're not gonna be able to have time to learn Torah.
That's all we're doing.
I'm saying when we come into the end
You
of the
mean
time,
like this is
when
the pain
Mashiach
of
is-
the birth pangs is that nobody has time to learn? And
I'm
therefore-
saying what the last, because Pharaoh says, you have time to think, you have time to, complain and everything. I'm going to give you more work.
Right.
So let's say at the time of the Mashiach, when it comes, maybe we're going to be so tired, so working so hard
That's
because
exactly
we don't
what
have,
it is. That's exactly what it is.
so we don't have time to...
The whole reason we learn about that story in Mitzrayim, because that's exactly what's happening to us at the
Why do
end.
you think everything's going up in price now? So you work twice as much.
Right.
in
When
order
things
to
are not
have-
going good in a person's business, he decides to work even more instead of doing the opposite.
Yes.
Stop and think.
Yeah.
Like,
Paro just wants you to work more. Maybe you just started learning Rabbi Nachman's Torah. He's concerned about you. Seriously. That's Da'at. This is the essence of Da'at. So listen to what we're going to say now. Aval kasher dibur below Da'at. But what happens when your speech doesn't have Da'at? As I ain bo tov, then there's no good in your speech. Ki tov. It's not good. It's not like the light. It's not like Moshe.
When I do it, I'm just doing an impression of it. Like, sounds coming off.
Listen to what Shlomo Melech says in an open, explicit pasuk in Mishlei. He says, "Gam blo dat nefesh lo tov." It's not good for your nefesh, for a soul, to be without da'at. It's not good for your nefesh to be without da'at. That's not good. It's only good when there's da'at. Shlomo Melech is saying it explicitly. And what's your nefesh? Nefesh hu bechina dibur. Your nefesh is speech, right? You have 5 levels of your soul. The level of your soul corresponding to your speaking is nefesh, the lowest level of your soul. So what is he saying? Gam blo da'at nefesh lo tov. When your nefesh doesn't have da'at, meaning when your speech doesn't have truth, it's not good, because it's not heard. Now, let's go even deeper. You right? You guys are going with me down the rabbit hole. You ready?
Oh, the red pill.
Kamosha Katuv, like it says in Bereshit, when HaShem created Adam, V'yehi Adam lenefesh chaya. He made him a living nefesh. So what does
difference-
Uncle us explain, what is the fact that he's a living nefesh? What makes a human being different than anybody else? So he says, L'ruach mamale. He is a speaking spirit. What makes man man is that he speaks. So what's the simple understanding most people get from this? That we're the only thing that communicates with speech. But I want to say that's very hard to understand, because many things in this world communicate
But through sound.
with sounds, but not through speech, because speech has da'at, and only a human being possesses da'at. Oh, you hear what we're saying right now? It's unbelievable.
He likes this.
That's what it means, that he made us man, that he made us a speaking spirit, meaning he gave us the ability to speak in a way that it changes reality, because he gave us da'at. And if you don't have it, you're not called a person, and that's exactly what Rabbi Nachman says elsewhere in Likutey Moharan, that a person who doesn't have da'at, he doesn't have God consciousness, he doesn't have Torah, he's not called a human being. And you think he's trying to be disparaging and he's trying to hate on the person, why? Because he's not learning. That's not what he's doing. He's saying this is a simple, natural consequence. You don't have da'at, you're not a person, because you can't speak.
He's still in the matrix.
You can only be an animal who can't speak, because the only thing that can speak is man, because he has da'at.
So what about the person that cannot speak?
He's not a person.
Because he's a man, man. You mean literally a guy who can't speak?
Yeah.
Okay, but we're talking about just in general, I mean your speech isn't heard. We'll deal with that later, okay? Questions for the end. You can hold on to it?
Is sign language also allowed?
But you're gonna forget?
So you hear what we're saying? What's the chidush of man? The chidush of man is that we're able to speak while the rest of creation can't speak. But the rest of creation does speak. But they're not speaking, they're talking. We speak. Because our speech creates. Their speech can create.
Talking goes into one ear.
That's why we have free will, they do not. Because how can you give free will to something that can create? Because that's dangerous. You need to make sure it's with man who has da'at. Because if he doesn't have da'at and he starts creating, that's bad news for everybody. So I want to show you something amazing. You ready? Look at these spheres. So we're saying that the only good that exists in this world is da'at. So let's take an example. Let's try and take a quality and remove the da'at and see what happens. You ready? Rav Kook, a famous mystic and Mekubal, and he was the leader of Eretz Yisrael, the first chief rabbi of the land of Israel. What does he say? The reason that we cannot fulfill the mitzvah of love your brother like yourself, and therefore we're in exile. Why are we not able to do this? Just love your brother like yourself. Why can't you do that? We're in exile because we
don't love yourself.
Okay, so this is an answer that we give elsewhere. But we have a simpler answer than that. We have a simpler answer than that. Rav Kook says, because our love is based on an emotion. But the love that the Torah is speaking about, that you're able to love your brother like yourself, is based on da'at, he says. It's rooted in God consciousness, in knowledge. So, for instance, sometimes you like your friend, sometimes you don't like your friend. What is it based on? How he's making you feel at that moment. So therefore, you can't fulfill the mitzvah. So how could HaShem command us that the whole Torah is based on this klal, everything is rooted in this klal, and yet we can't hold ourselves by it? Does that make sense? Would HaShem give us a mitzvah that the whole Torah is based on and we can't fulfill it? That doesn't make sense. But now we can understand, how do you fulfill the mitzvah if he's constantly making you feel differently? Because your love for him is not based on how you're feeling. Your love for him is based on the truth of your situation, that he's your brother. And that's why you love him. You don't love him because of how he makes you feel. You love him because he is a piece of God.
Because if you took the first example of loving somebody based off emotions, you'll never love anybody. Because everybody's going to somehow, some way get you.
That's right, exactly. So you cannot maintain love for anybody, and now we see why the divorce rate is so high. Because everybody's love is based on their emotions.
The mercy of their emotions.
Just as their emotions. And what does the Torah teach? That when the emotions control the mind, that's called exile. But when the mind is in control of the emotions, that's called redemption.
And that's what it's speaking through Lashon HaKodesh.
The Holy Tanya, it says, you know what I'm going to say? Chapter 2, right? Yeah, it says that when emotions are in control of the mind during your animal soul, when your mind is in control of emotions during your
It's your godly soul. That's right. That's exactly what I want to say. So now I want to show you.
So Lashon HaKodesh comes from where? The heart
So
of
the
the
Baal
mind.
Tanya says that when you say you love Hashem, and you don't have da'at, you're not learning Torah, he says your love is a complete power of your own imagination. It's not rooted in reality.
Can you repeat that one more time, sir?
It says that if your love for Hashem, and this would apply to anybody, your love for your wife, your love for your parents, is not based on truth, then you don't really love them. You have a fantasy in
Can
mind.
you give us an example?
Example. I love my mom because she
Made me breakfast this morning.
made me breakfast this morning. So then what happens when she doesn't make you breakfast? You don't love her anymore. But should your love on your mom be based on that? No. Why do you love your mother? Because she gave birth to you. That never changes. That's always a fact. So that's based on knowledge. My love is based on knowledge, and therefore it never changes.
It's not based off the situation. It's more of the relationship that I have with that person.
What is love your brother like yourself? Meaning, just like I have a piece of God in me, my nefesh elokit, so does every other Jew. I love them like myself means because I love the piece of God that's inside of them. And that never changes. That's not what I'm saying. That never changes. But it's based on knowledge. It's based on knowledge. So a feeling, bli knowledge, without knowledge, that's called evil. Only when your feeling is infused with knowledge is that called good. Only when your speech is infused with knowledge is that called good.
That's exactly what Carl does.
So the only way to be free, right? Now let's see. What did it say? What did it say about the Jewish people when we were in exile? Rav Nachman has an unbelievable chiddush. What does he say? Rav Nachman says when we were in exile, nobody was speaking to Hashem. Speech was in exile. So the simple way of understanding what Rav Nachman is saying is that nobody was talking to Hashem. But again, this is hard to understand. How could you be enslaved for 200 years? You know God exists and nobody's talking and nobody's praying. It doesn't make any sense.
No, they were praying because the Torah says they were.
Okay, so how does Rav Nachman say they didn't speak to Hashem? How do you say that? Boy, he's just lying? Where's he
Well,
getting
the Torah says that that Hashem heard their cry.
Right, that's the end. But I'm saying, he says the whole time that they were enslaved for over 200 years, he says they never spoke to Hashem. Okay. So the question is, how does that make any
They never
sense?
spoke to Hashem in truth.
They didn't speak to him; they talked to him.
Right.
They were talking to him, and that's why they didn't. And that's why they couldn't leave slavery. And that's why only when Moshe came, meaning God came, now they could speak to Hashem, and now they can leave.
Good question.
Yes.
How do I practically
Do this.
how do I practically
Wait, we're
get
gonna say.
da'at, get good in my speech?
We're actually going to talk
I'm
about
good
it.
talking to Hashem.
So complaining
Right.
to Hashem in your Hidborodut
Straight up, 100%.
is not coming from truth.
He always does that.
Because
When
when
he
you're
gets
complaining, you're not acknowledging Hashem.
good.
So that's what Hashem is always saying, thank.
And we'll leave it for tomorrow.
We're going to talk more about that.
We'll get there.
Benny just said a very important point. He says, why is Rav Aro saying not to complain when you pray? So he's saying because really complaint is coming from your own power of imagination.
It's coming from your emotion, which isn't that.
Because the truth is that everything Hashem does is good. Now maybe what you're feeling, you're not liking it, and you're telling Hashem that. That's okay, that's based on truth. But you're complaining to Hashem, that can't be based on truth. And that's why Rav Arush is telling you don't complain to Hashem. Because those words can't be heard, because they're not true.
You wouldn't complain.
Yeah,
about
but you
something.
saying thank you also is not true.
Yes, it is.
Why is it true? Oh, thank you, Hashem, my mom.
No. So Rav Arush himself says you shouldn't be thanking and not meaning it. You should be meaning it. So therefore you would have to learn.
But it says thank you for everything.
Right.
Thank you, Hashem, for everything.
That's right.
Hashem, thank you that my car didn't work today. Hashem, thank you that
That's true.
But how are you thankful for it?
So then you have to work on bringing that truth into your heart.
So it's again in the heart.
It's truth in the heart. Truth.
Mind and the heart together.
Okay, yes, mind and the heart together, exactly. Okay? So this is the whole reason they were in slavery. They couldn't speak to Hashem, but they were talking to Hashem. Maybe they were even praying to Hashem. Maybe they were even learning Torah. I don't know what they were doing. but they weren't speaking to him. And Moshe comes and he teaches them how to speak. Because he is Da'at. So as soon as they connected to the Tzaddik, which is part of the answer, as soon as they connected to the Tzaddik Yesod Olam, who is the concept of Da'at, then their speech could be infused with knowledge. And then they started to leave slavery immediately.
Maybe they were learning Torah, but they just weren't speaking the Torah.
We know that Levi for sure was learning Torah, and that's why they weren't enslaved. But still, there was no speech. Okay? So now, does anybody have any questions actually before we move on? Because we're going to move on to the next section. And I
Yes.
think we should ask questions before we move on.
Yes. You mentioned in the beginning that when we talk to Hashem, it's not necessarily speaking; it's just talking, right? Because there's no dad, there's no truth in it.
Yeah.
So, like in that situation, does that take away from us? Because like when we pour our hearts to Hashem, when we try to bring that into our conversation with Hashem, does that take away from the effort that we put into it?
No. So in fact, part of the way to get to the Da'at is to talk before you can speak.
Okay. Got it.
It's that strong.
Pray with Torah, because eventually they
Serious question, huh?
Because the Jewish people cried to Hashem, and even though it didn't have Da'at, Hashem had Rachamim because they
Right.
wanted. And because they wanted, then He gave them Moshe.
So it didn't directly change nature, but it kind of led to it.
Right. The want led to Hashem having mercy on them, because that's how it works. When you want Hashem, He has Rachamim on you. And His Rachamim was to send Da'at to them, so now He can hear their speech and actually change their life.
But now
We're saying big stuff right now.
But
You know
now
what
we
I'm
need to
saying, right?
practically.
Yeah, we're
like,
gonna talk about it.
Yeah,
We're gonna
you know?
talk.
So you need the ratzon.
The Ratzon is what you start with.
Okay.
And then
And the more you talk, the more ratzon you build.
Yes.
Eventually have enough ratzon to speak.
to
Why
bring
do
you
it.
think?
So like
Do you think
weird.
they had that Da'at?
Ratzon.
No, we're not talking about Moshe. We're talking about
The Jewish people.
the Emunah. You understand?
So the Emunah that's based on Da'at, they didn't have it.
They didn't have
That's
it.
why they're enslaved. Yeah.
Right.
You would assume that they did though, because they're enslaved. They have the
No,
experience.
that's the
of not-
whole slavery is they didn't have a Emunah.
When they got
That is the
Da'at, they
slavery.
became
You're not
Moshe,
enslaved.
they were out of
Oh, so slavery isn't that Pharaoh was whipping them and this and
That's
that.
also true, but that only happened because
nowhere near you.
Hashem only did that because Abraham said, "How am I going to know?" Meaning a pagam and Emunah. So Paro was forcing them into believing in Hashem by causing them to suffer.
But what got them into the slavery in the first place, in a deeper sense?
Abraham, the first pagam and Emunah. How am I
caused them to be
How am I
slave.
gonna know? Meaning the first time he spoke without Da'at.
How did he lose that?
He said,
all of a
"How
sudden?
am I gonna know?"
How you gonna know what?
But why do we suffer from our ancestors?
Because they are us. We were there for them.
Wait, what do you mean? How am I gonna know? When was this happening?
When he said to him, "I'm gonna
didn't mean it
make
like
your
that. I
kid
mean it.
like the stars, like the sand," right? Abraham says, "Great, I believe you." But then when he says, "I'm gonna bring you to the land of Israel," he says, "How am I gonna know?" And Chazal teach that for that reason, Hashem said, your children are going to go into exile for 400 years. Part of the reason why it had such a deep effect is because he's the first Jew. And any time that the first happens, that has a rippling effect for the rest of history. Just like a baby in the womb, right? Anything that happens later in the pregnancy has a minimal effect, right? If he gets a little scratch when he comes out, so he has a scratch, it's going to heal. But if he gets that same exact scratch while he's in utero and he's forming, he's going to have that scratch the rest of his life. And what if he had that same exact scratch when the first conception happened? That baby's never going to happen. So you see that
They say when a man's with his wife, the thoughts that he has in his mind affects the Hashem.
Yes. But the earlier you go in any process, the deeper and the more long-lasting is that effect. And that's the reason why Adam's sin lasts forever. Because he's the first thing that ever happened.
Oh, because he had the pagam. Everybody had
He's like the seed that had a pagam in the beginning, and now that seed is going to turn into the creation, and we all are going to have it. But if Adam came a
Genetic
lot
marker.
later, we wouldn't all have it, only Adam would have it.
Genetic marker.
Right? You don't see with you don't see with things that happen like thousands of years later that thing affects all the Jewish people. It was only things that happened in the first couple thousand years of creation. Because that's like the beginning when we're in utero. Yes.
He said, how am I gonna know? That was, so to speak, a punishment.
Yeah.
But the punishment was answering his question. It's like, you'll know.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put you in the deepest darkness and then give you the biggest light.
That's right.
It's like, you'll know, because when I give you Israel, it's gonna be the biggest thing you've ever seen in your life. So the punishment in and of itself wasn't an answer to it.
Yeah. No, you're right. That's Hashem's love for us. That even in His punishment, He actually brought redemption.
Can a person speak in his dream? Because you hear plenty of
He's like,
dreams.
I mean, because every night, like, what am
No,
I?
I'm saying because in the Torah there's mentions of lots of dreams and they spoke in those dreams. Are those dreams made understanding through the speech?
spoke
It depends. The Gemara says
This person.
every single dream that you have has some truth and some craziness. So I guess the part that's true, if it's spoken, that's speech, and if it's not, it's sheker. It's
I want to see
never.
the dead in your dream.
What?
You see the dead.
Okay, I'm not Sephardic. We're not going to get into dreams right now.
it's a Kabbalistic
Anyway,
We need the red hat guy.
yeah, you need to go with the red hat. Okay, I'm not the guy with the red hat. Any other questions before we move forward? No? Okay, good. We're gonna get the
What
first.
Torah is this?
This is 29. We're gonna get the first piece of Eitzah now. How do we draw dot into our speech? That's what we all want to
Hide
know.
yourself in a closet. For sure, we're not.
Kill Benny. No, I'm just kidding.
Prayer, learning prayer.
Wait. It's not what you think. It's something very interesting, and it actually sheds a light on if you ever went to 770. Uhakim uromem et adat. In order to raise up and enhance your dot, so it can now infuse your speech. Hu ayedei shevach hatzadikim. It's through the praise of tzaddikim.
We always go back to that, right?
What do you mean praise?
No, we never spoke about
Like
this.
cover of tzaddikim?
No, praise of tzaddikim.
So we started the honor for something.
Right, so that's
Now praise.
Now praising them.
Okay.
Meaning what? Somehow, just based on when you go to somebody and say, hey, they say, what are you learning? I'm learning Rabbi Nachman. And they say, what is it like? And you say, oh my God, he's such a genius. He's so amazing. He's saving my life. He's unbelievable. Like, you never heard any Torah like his Torah. That's Shevach Tzadikim, and somehow this draws down dot into your speech. We're going to have to figure out how this works, but it's a mechanism. Shevach Tzadikim, praise of Tzadikim, draws dot into your speech. Now, very interestingly, when I was in 770 for the first time, the first thing I noticed is every Chabadnik, the entire Shabbat, did not stop talking Shevach about the Rebbe. The whole entire time, it wasn't, and the Rebbe did this, and the Rebbe did that. And I'm like, this is a cult.
They're non-stop. They don't just do it there, they send people out.
And I left, and I was like, wow, this is mamash a cult. And now I realize they were taught it. That wasn't like a random thing that came organically through the movement of Chabad, that became and like deteriorated. That was taught to them in their Hasidus, that this would infuse their speech with Da'at by giving praise to the Tzaddik.
Because he gave truth over. And
You're gonna see, because what did Rav Nachman say in another Torah? That Tzaddik in every generation are the concept of Moshe. And if Moshe is the concept of Da'at, then the tzaddikim are the concept of da'at, and only da'at is good. So the only good in any generation are the tzaddikim.
So you should only
And
think
not
about
just the tzaddikim, but the tzaddikim also within you. That piece of you that's called tzaddik is also the only good that's
good
within
points
you.
inside of you.
Yeah. This is what Rav Nachman
Zamra.
says. Yeah, Zamra. The whole beginning of you leaving your exile,
Focusing on
just
the good.
focus on the good in you. Why? Because that's the truth.
That's called.
And that's going to bring you close to Hashem, because da'at means knowledge that brings me close to Hashem.
That's called truth.
Right, and that's called
light.
truth. That's light. And that's why you start to come out. That's a zamra, and that's why it's such a fundamental lesson. That's why Shevach Tzadikim is so big, because that's the only good that exists. So even in the commentary here, he says, even though Shevach Tzadikim is the highest form of praise, he says, even when you say something good about your friend that's true, he says that's also referring to this. This also brings da'at into your speech. Or if you say something good about yourself, you judge yourself favorably, that's also called Shevach Tzadikim.
Because we all
Because you're
connected.
judging the piece of you that's called tzaddik.
But we all connected.
That's also true. That's also true. But we're saying that anything that's called good is called da'at. And there is no da'at beside Moshe. And Moshe is the tzaddik. So the only good in the world comes from tzaddikim. Not just the physical tzaddikim that exist, but the part of everything that's tzaddik.
Does that person need to have that necessary quality?
everybody has tzaddik within them. Everybody, because that's the piece.
everybody
Everybody
has
has to have good in them, or they can't exist.
If you want to focus on the good of that person, but let's say he doesn't have that good.
It can't. It's impossible. It can't be.
He wouldn't exist.
That's
if
why
he
you have
had
to. That's why Rav Nachman stresses you have to work so hard to just find that good.
How
Oh,
about
I just had such a steep chiddush. Wait, steep, such a steep,
Within F, within
such a deep
F.
chiddush.
Steve within it.
There's a very famous story of Rav Levi of Berdichev. Okay, he was a very, very big Hasidic master. He's a very big tzaddik. He was known for only looking for the good in everybody, like in a crazy way. He only saw good with everything, in a way like it's just unbelievable. You couldn't imagine it. There's a story about him that he was the Chazan. I told you guys this story, but I want to show you the chiddush that just popped into my head. He was the Chazan, so he's praying for the whole community, and he was waiting up there for an hour after they were supposed to start praying, just going like this. He turned around and he was just looking like this
Make sure to find out.
for an hour, and everybody's waiting. But because he's a Hasidic master, nobody says anything, and you're a Chassid, you don't do anything about it because you're honoring him, and they're just waiting there like, hello, Shachri, let's start Shachri, we gotta go to work. Nothing happens for an hour. He finally goes, he walks back 3 steps, he walks forward, he starts. They all come to him after, Rebbe, what happened? You didn't pray for an hour, what were you doing? He said, whenever I start praying, prior to praying, I look at everybody in the minyan and I find a good point inside of them before I start praying.
I didn't know him. I mean, he doesn't know.
Then he finds whatever good he can find from the person he
The
doesn't
fact
know.
that he's a Jew is a good
He's a
sign.
Jew. He found something. But he said there was one guy, I couldn't find any good in him. So I waited for an hour until I could figure it out. And I realized, why is he doing a dafka before he prays? Because that's what allows the prayer to get answered. Because he sees the tov in everybody, and the tov is what allows it to become speech, and that's what allows everybody's speech to be heard. Ooh, you hear the chiddush?
It's a,
Yeah.
but there's an even deeper chiddush. It was 1 hour.
It took him 1 hour.
1 hour of not speaking.
Okay.
Nobody could speak.
So listen to what he says. I know he was speaking.
Good one.
You again.
What happens when you praise the tzaddikim? I mean, Maaseh, what happens that you praise tzaddikim and all of a sudden you now have da'at? Is it magic? Because when you praise and you extol all the virtues of tzaddikim, through this is elevated da'at. Like it says in the pasuk in Devarim, Knesher Ya'ir Kino, that the eagle, he arouses his nest. That's the simple understanding. But in Aramaic, the word for
Nest.
no, the word eagle, nesher, in Aramaic is very closely related. Rav Nachman says to nishra. It's like the same word in Aramaic. What does nishra mean? It means spirit or soul. Okay? So he says, da rucha. This is what Tikuni Zohar says. That the nesher, the eagle, is the ruach. It's the soul of the tzaddik. Da b'chinat tzaddik. That the tzaddik is the eagle which is arousing the nest. So what is he arousing? What is he arousing?
Speech.
Listen what he says. Listen how amazing this is. Listen how gewaldic this is. The pasuk says the eagle arouses his nest. So Rav Nachman just proved, according to the Tikuni Zohar, that the eagle is always the concept of the tzaddik, because the word eagle and the word tzaddik is like the same in Hebrew and Aramaic. Okay. So what is he arousing in the nest? Ya'ir kino. The quality of kino. What is kino? It comes from the word king, meaning mochin. What does it mean that the eagle is arousing the nest? He's arousing your mochin.
Godly consciousness.
He's arousing the da'at in your mind. From mochin the katnut to mochin the gadlut. From small contracted consciousness to expanded consciousness. This is what it means that the eagle arouses the birds in his nest. It means that the tzaddik is arousing the moach, the God consciousness within you. Where do you get that from, kino? Where do you get that from the word nest? Because the word kino is from the word kaneh, which means acquire. And what does it say? It says in Mishlei, kaneh hochma, kaneh bina. Acquire Chokhmah, acquire Bina. Meaning what? That the only acquisition you can make is mochin. The only true thing that you can acquire in this world is da'at. That's why it says in the Gemara that anyone who has da'at, he has everything. And anyone who doesn't have da'at, kol. Anyone who doesn't have da'at, he's impoverished. He doesn't have anything. Why? Because the only acquisition a person can actually make is in da'at. So what does it mean that the eagle arouses its nest? It means that the tzaddik arouses your da'at. The word kaneh comes from, and then deeper than that, what does the Gemara say? The Gemara in Brachot says, whoever sees a kaneh, a reed, in his dream, he can expect to obtain chokhmah, da'at. It's the same exact thing that we're talking about. All these words, kaneh, kani, kani, all of these words come from the camp.
Also, this week's parsha, Avram acquired a grave.
What's a reed?
What?
What's a reed?
A reed like a stick.
Any type of stick.
No, like a stick that comes from like an island, you know, like those bamboo sticks,
Reeds grow out of
like that
marshes.
you beat people with. Not me, but like you guys do. Yeah. So that's like
Mom is this week's parsha. Why did he want that? Because he saw that they would be buried there. There was a certain chokhmah that he acquired. He acquired it.
and then maybe that's why only Esau's head got in there.
Then he's trying to connect the dots.
Okay.
That's crazy. Oh, and it was also the entrance of Gan Eden. Whenever you have chokhmah, you can enter Gan Eden again.
So I want to finish with a chiddush, and then we're going to continue. There's a lot more to
Your
say.
chiddush? Your chiddush?
Yeah, a little chiddush. It's not my chiddush. I found this, but I thought about it when we were doing it. He brings a pasuk. He brings a pasuk a little bit later, and he talks about the tzaddik, how he arouses mochin, and he brings the concept that he has ruach. That's what allows him to do that. So he brings the pasuk about when Moshe said, "I want a leader who's going to follow me after me, who's going to be a fitting leader." So he says, "Choose Yeshua, because Yeshua has a ruach in him." So what did Rashi say that meant? It means he would be able to guide all of the Jewish people because he knew everybody according to them. He spoke to them according to who they were. He had that inner knowledge. You know what that inner knowledge is called? Da'at. It's like an emotional knowledge. It's like an intuitive knowledge. It's something deep, yeah. So that's why he said Yeshua is going to replace you because he has this quality of ruach. Okay? Now, interestingly, the gematria of Yoshua ben Nun
Ooh, I know it.
is 555. 555.
0, 1, 2, 3.
What is the gematria of Ha-Nesher, the eagle? 555.
The eagle?
Or David Kalmus.
That the eagle is what arouses the nest, meaning Yeshua, who takes us into the land of Israel. How does he do it? By taking us out of exile, by arousing the mochin of the Jewish people.
But he connects us to the tzaddik.
Right? And who does Yeshua come from?
Ben Nun.
Yes, but who is he coming from? Who is his great-grandfather or his grandfather? Ephraim. And who is Ephraim the son of? Yosef.
Joseph.
Because he comes from the tzaddik. He's born from the tzaddik. That's why he's the only one who can defeat Esau in the end and bring us into the land of Israel.
Mashiach ben Yosef.
Yeah.
Mashiach ben Yosef.
Link.
Is Yeshua ben Nun. Yeah.
And he also took us to the land of Israel.
That's exactly the role of
Ben
Mashiach
David.
but that's specifically the role of Mashiach ben Yosef. How do you know it's him? One of the reasons you know, says the Rambam, he takes you into the land of Israel. So Yeshua was Mashiach ben Yosef. Why? Because he comes from Yosef, he took us into the land.
Wow. Sick.
Why? Because he had a ruach in him.
I gotta put him
Because he was a tzaddik. Okay, we're going to continue on Monday night. Thank you guys. Be blessed.
Amen.